The Kraxan warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their obsidian hulls absorbing Earth's sunlight like cosmic predators preparing to strike. On the bridge of the flagship Dominion, High Commander Vextra watched the blue planet with 6 golden eyes, mandibles clicking in barely contained disdain. Primitive, she chittered, analyzing the readings before her. Their most advanced satellites are using technology we mastered centuries ago. Her carapace shifted, iridescent patches reflecting the soft blue glow of tactical displays. This will be swift. Yet on Earth's surface, Commander Sarah Chen stood in the basement of the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, studying a relic that predated her grandmother's birth. The M2 Mortar, manufactured in 1943, sat before her on a workbench alongside modern targeting computers and experimental materials. "Ma'am," with respect, Lieutenant Rodriguez said, "the Kraxan's shield technology is beyond anything we've encountered. Our most advanced missiles can't penetrate their defenses. How can World War I-era weapons help?" Sarah ran her fingers along the mortar's barrel, feeling the history in its metal. "Because sometimes the old ways are the best ways, Lieutenant. The Kraxan expect lasers, railguns, and plasma weapons. Their shields are calibrated for high-energy impacts." She lifted the mortar round, its weight familiar in her hands. "But what happens when you throw a rock at a force field designed to stop lightning?" Above them, the first wave of Kraxan dropships entered Earth's atmosphere. Their thermal signatures blazed across global defense networks as they descended toward major population centers. The alien invaders had expected resistance, missile launches, electromagnetic pulses, perhaps even primitive nuclear weapons. Instead, they encountered nothing but silence. In her command center, Sarah watched the tactical display as red dots representing Kraxan forces appeared over cities worldwide. "They think we're cowering," she said to her assembled staff. "Let them think that. Operation Throwback is now in effect." Across the globe, military units moved under cover of darkness, trading in their modern combat vehicles for restored Sherman tanks and vintage artillery pieces. Weapon caches dating back to the 1940s were unsealed, their contents distributed to resistance cells. The Kraxan would be looking for energy signatures, heat blooms, and electronic emissions. They wouldn't be scanning for spring-loaded firing pins and percussion caps. The first Kraxan ground forces deployed in Mexico City, their powered armor gleaming as they established a beachhead. Combat drones buzzed overhead, scanning for threats with sensors calibrated to detect 21st-century weapons. They found nothing. "Sector secure," reported Ground Commander Crix. "No resistance detected. These humans are even more cowardly than intel suggested." He strode forward, his armor's energy shield shimming with each step. "Begin civilian processing." The explosion that followed wasn't the high-energy plasma burst he'd been trained to defend against. It was crude, chemical, and devastating. The mortar round, fired from a weathered tube hidden in a nearby church bell tower, arced gracefully through the sky. The Kraxan's shields, designed to disperse energy weapons, did nothing to stop the simple kinetic projectile. Crix's last transmission was a confused screech as his command squad disappeared in a cloud of shrapnel and smoke. Similar scenes played out across the globe as humanity's antiquated weapons found gaps in alien defenses that modern arms couldn't penetrate. On the Dominion, High Commander Vextra's mandibles clattered in fury as reports flooded in. "Impossible. Their weapons are archaic. How are they bypassing our shields?" Her tactical officer, young for his rank, ventured an answer. "High Commander, it appears the humans are using projectile weapons. Mechanical launchers utilizing chemical propellants. Our shields are optimized for." "I know what our shields are optimized for," Vextra snapped. "Adjust the harmonics. Full spectrum coverage. That will reduce shield efficiency by 60%, High Commander." "Do it. I will not lose ground forces to primitive explosives." Back in Cheyenne Mountain, Sarah Chen allowed herself a small smile as she read the incoming reports. The Kraxan were adapting, but each adjustment they made to their shields weakened them against other forms of attack. It was just as she predicted. Phase 1 complete, she announced to her staff. Begin Phase 2. Let's show these aliens that humanity didn't survive millennia of warfare by relying on technology alone. Sometimes, the old ways are the deadliest. As night fell over Earth's battlefields, the sound of mortar fire echoed through cities and countryside alike. The Kraxan had arrived expecting to find a primitive species clinging to outdated technology. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that had turned their own assumptions into a weapon. The war for Earth had begun, and humanity's first victory had come not from the latest military innovation, but from the deadly wisdom of ages past. Major James O'Connor stood in the rain, watching as his team retrofitted a line of M1 Garand rifles with modern composite materials. The weapons, pulled from military museums and private collections, represented a bridge between past and present, just like the former history professor himself. "Sir," Sergeant Miller called out, holding up one of the modified rifles. "We've replaced the original springs and added the experimental coating to the rounds. But are you sure about this? These things belonged in a museum even before my grandfather was born." James picked up one of the modified rifles, feeling its familiar weight. Before the invasion, he'd specialized in military history, particularly World War II small arms development. Now that academic knowledge had become the cornerstone of humanity's resistance, the Kraxan analyzed our modern weapon systems and built their defenses accordingly, he explained, checking the rifle's action. But they never bothered to study our military history. That's their mistake. Above them, Kraxan patrol ships prowl through the cloud cover, their sensors sweeping for the energy signatures of modern weapons. They pass directly over the resistance camp, blind to the mechanical weapons below. In the 2 weeks since Operation Throwback began, the aliens had lost thousands of troops to weapons their scanners couldn't detect. On the Dominion, High Commander Vextra reviewed casualty reports with growing rage. Her tactical officers had adjusted shield harmonics multiple times, but the humans kept finding new ways to bypass their defenses. The latest reports described human soldiers using primitive rifled weapons that somehow penetrated their most advanced armor. "Explain this," she demanded, throwing a damaged armor piece onto the briefing table. A simple lead bullet, coated with something their sensors couldn't identify, had punched through shields and plating alike. Her chief scientist, Dalrock, examined the damage pattern. The humans have developed some form of metamaterial coating for their projectiles. It creates a localized field effect that interacts with our shield harmonics in ways we didn't anticipate. "They're savages," Vextra hissed. "How are they combining primitive projectile weapons with advanced materials science?" "Perhaps," Dalrock ventured carefully, "we underestimated their adaptability. They're using their technological limitations as an advantage." Back on Earth, James led his team through drills with their modified weapons. The Garand's 8-round clip might have seemed primitive compared to modern firearms, but with the new composite-coated ammunition, each shot could drop a Kraxan soldier through their supposedly impenetrable shields. "Remember," he called out to his troops, "aim for center mass. Their armor is weakest where the shield emitters connect. The coating on our rounds will do the rest." Reports from around the globe confirmed the effectiveness of their strategy. In Paris, resistance fighters used modified Lee-Enfield rifles to defend the catacombs. Australian forces employed old Owen guns to ambush Kraxan patrols in the outback. Each engagement proved that humanity's martial past held the key to their survival. The breakthrough came during a skirmish outside Vancouver. A Kraxan battle group, attempting to establish a forward base, found themselves under attack from what their sensors initially dismissed as harmless projectile fire. The composite-coated rounds tore through their defenses, turning their advanced armor into expensive coffins. "It's not just about the weapons," James explained to his officers during the after-action briefing. "It's about how we use them. The Kraxan fight like they're playing a video game. All sensors and energy weapons. We're fighting like our grandparents did, with iron sights and trigger discipline." The resistance grew bolder. Teams of historians and engineers worked together, combining ancient weapon designs with modern material science. They discovered that the simpler the weapon, the harder it was for Kraxan systems to detect and counter it. In her Mountain Command Center, Commander Chen received O'Connor's latest report with satisfaction. The modified rifles were exceeding all expectations, and Kraxan casualties continued to mount. But she knew the aliens wouldn't remain blind forever. They'll adapt eventually, she told her staff. But every adjustment they make to their shields and armor weakens them in other ways. We're forcing them to fight on our terms, not theirs. James watched as another group of recruits practiced with their modified weapons. The rain had stopped, and in the distance, he could see Kraxan ships patrolling the horizon. They still hadn't realized that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology. It was their ability to learn from the past. "Load up," he ordered his team. "Tonight, we're taking the fight to them. Let's show these aliens why humans never stop teaching military history." As the sun set, resistance fighters across Earth prepared for another night of combat. The Kraxan had come expecting to find an inferior species. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that had turned their own technological superiority into a weakness, using wisdom accumulated through centuries of warfare to overcome seemingly impossible odds. The age-old dance of adaptation and counter-adaptation continued, but now humanity had seized the initiative. And they had done it not by matching the Kraxan's advanced technology, but by reaching back to their roots and finding strength in their martial heritage. The Kraxan didn't understand why they were losing. In the command center of their ground forces, General Zexnar watched holographic displays showing yet another failed offensive. His forces, equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy, were being systematically destroyed by humans using technology that predated spaceflight. "Another battalion lost in the Moscow sector," his aide reported. "They're using some kind of tracked vehicle. Primitive combustion engine, basic armor plating. But what?" Zexnar demanded. "But our targeting systems can't get a lock. The weapons are too simple. There's nothing to hack, no energy signature to detect. They're just steel and explosives." The vehicle in question was a restored T-34 tank, one of hundreds that humanity had pulled from museums and private collections worldwide. Captain Natasha Petrova stood in the commander's cupola, directing her crew through Moscow's rubble-strewn streets. The tank's diesel engine roared as it pursued a retreating group of Kraxan soldiers. "Loading," her gunner shouted, ramming home another modified round. The shell, coated with the same metamaterials as the rifle ammunition, could punch through Kraxan shields like they weren't there. On target, the T-34's gun thundered, and another alien squad disappeared in a flash of fire and shattered shields. Across the globe, similar scenes played out as humanity's mechanical war machines proved immune to the Kraxan's electronic warfare. You couldn't hack a firing pin. You couldn't jam a spring-loaded mechanism. The aliens' technological superiority had become their greatest weakness. Commander Chen monitored the global situation from Cheyenne Mountain. "Status report," she demanded. "Moscow holding strong. Paris reporting successful counterattacks. Beijing has pushed the Kraxan back to their landing zones. And," her aide paused, double-checking the data, "Australia has been completely cleared of enemy forces." Chen allowed herself a brief smile. The Kraxan's attempt to establish a foothold in the outback had met with disaster. Australian forces, using a combination of World War I-era Owen guns and restored Matilda tanks, had eliminated the alien presence entirely. On the Dominion, High Commander Vextra faced a crisis. Her invasion force, once seemingly invincible, had lost a quarter of its strength to weapons that their most advanced sensors could barely detect. The humans weren't just resisting. They were winning. "We must adapt," she declared to her war council. "Full spectrum scanning. Constant shield modulation. I want every piece of primitive human technology analyzed and countered." "High Commander," her science officer interjected, "such comprehensive scanning will reduce our operational efficiency by 80%. Our energy consumption will triple. We can't maintain our technological advantage while defending against every possible threat. Then we'll overwhelm them with numbers. Deploy the reserve forces, all of them. The decision would prove catastrophic. As Kraxan ships descended through Earth's atmosphere in unprecedented numbers, they faced a new threat. Humanity had anticipated this response and prepared accordingly. In the skies over North America, restored P-51 Mustangs and Spitfires, their frames reinforced with modern materials and their ammunition enhanced with shield-penetrating coatings, engaged Kraxan fighters. The alien pilots, trained to fight with computer assistance and energy weapons, found themselves outmaneuvered by human pilots flying purely mechanical aircraft. This is Red Leader, called Squadron Leader Marcus Wong, his Spitfire diving through a formation of Kraxan fighters. Remember your training. Keep it simple. They can't track what they can't detect. The dogfights that followed would become legendary. Kraxan fighters, their targeting systems confused by the lack of electronic signatures, fell to guns that had first seen action over Europe a century earlier. The aliens' superior technology became meaningless in the face of pure pilot skill and mechanical reliability. On the ground, the pattern repeated. Kraxan ground forces, their shields constantly shifting to counter multiple threat types, found their energy reserves depleting rapidly. Human forces pressed the advantage, using their knowledge of terrain and simple, reliable weapons to devastating effect. Commander Chen watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The Kraxan were finally breaking. Their formations, once precise and coordinated, had become scattered and reactive. Their attempts to counter every possible threat had left them vulnerable to all of them. "Send word to all commands," she ordered. "Operation Throwback enters its final phase. Push them back. Show them why humanity never forgot how to fight the old way." As night fell over Earth's battlefields, the sound of victory began to echo. Mechanical guns thundered, engines roared, and human courage proved more than a match for alien technology. The Kraxan had come expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that had turned their own superiority against them. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Humanity had proven that sometimes the oldest weapons were the deadliest, and that no amount of advanced technology could replace the wisdom earned through centuries of warfare. High Commander Vextra's mandibles trembled with barely contained rage as she watched her empire's greatest invasion force crumble. The Dominion's command center, once a model of military precision, had devolved into chaos as officers frantically tried to counter humanity's endless array of primitive weapons. 30% of our forces lost, her strategic advisor reported, antennae drooping. Our remaining troops are scattered. Shield systems are failing due to constant modulation, and we've lost air superiority in 17 major combat zones. Impossible. Vextra slammed her clawed appendage against the tactical display. We are the Kraxan. We've conquered 32 star systems. How are we losing to creatures who haven't even left their solar system? The answer came in the form of another battlefield report. In the ruins of Berlin, a combined force of restored German Panther tanks and British Cromwells had just destroyed the Kraxan's largest remaining ground base. The tanks, their engines producing nothing more sophisticated than heat and noise, had simply rolled through the alien sensor networks undetected. On Earth, Commander Chen coordinated the global counter-offensive from her mountain headquarters. "Status of Operation Throwback's final phase," she asked, studying the holographic display of Earth's major battlefields. "Better than expected, Commander," her intelligence officer replied. "The Kraxan are abandoning their standard doctrine completely. They're clustering their forces in dense formations, trying to create overlapping fields of fire. It's making them easy targets." Chen nodded. The aliens' desperation had forced them to abandon the very technological advantages that had made them formidable. Their attempts to counter every possible human weapon had left them vulnerable to all of them. In the skies over London, Squadron Leader Wong led his flight of modified Spitfires through the clouds. Below them, a massive Kraxan carrier had dropped its shields to conserve power, relying instead on point defense weapons to protect it from modern missiles. "They never learned," Wong muttered, diving toward the carrier. His Spitfire's 8-300 and 3 caliber machine guns, loaded with metamaterial-coated rounds, opened fire. The primitive bullets, invisible to the carrier's sophisticated defensive systems, tore through crucial systems. The carrier, burning from multiple wounds, tried to retreat. But humanity had learned from centuries of warfare that a wounded enemy was often the most vulnerable. More fighters appeared, their guns chattering. The massive alien vessel, pride of the Kraxan fleet, was brought down by weapons that should have been in museums. On the ground, Major O'Connor led a combined force of infantry and armor through the streets of Sydney. His soldiers, armed with their modified vintage weapons, encountered increasingly erratic resistance from the Kraxan forces. "They're breaking formation," his radio crackled. "The aliens are abandoning their defensive positions." O'Connor watched through binoculars as Kraxan troops fled from their fortifications. Their once coordinated retreat had become a rout. Years of relying on advanced technology had left them unprepared for warfare at its most basic level. "Press the advantage," he ordered. "But stay alert. A cornered enemy is still dangerous." In orbit, the Dominion's bridge had become a testament to the Kraxan's collapsing military doctrine. High Commander Vextra's officers argued openly about tactics while damage reports flooded in from the surface. "We must withdraw," her second-in-command finally stated. "Our forces are at 40% strength and falling. The humans aren't just defeating us. They're studying our responses, adapting their tactics. Every countermeasure we deploy gives them new weaknesses to exploit." Vextra's pride warred with her tactical training. The humans had done the impossible. They had taken their technological inferiority and turned it into an overwhelming advantage. Her empire's most sophisticated weapons have been rendered useless by machinery that ran on controlled explosions and springs. "Signal all commands," she finally chittered, her voice heavy with defeat. "Begin evacuation procedures. We'll withdraw to the outer system and reassess." On Earth, the news of the Kraxan retreat sparked celebrations tempered with caution. Commander Chen knew the aliens wouldn't accept defeat easily, but humanity had proven something extraordinary. They had shown that true military strength lay not in technological superiority, but in the ability to adapt, to think creatively, and to turn apparent weaknesses into strengths. "They'll be back," she told her staff, watching the Kraxan ships rising from Earth's atmosphere. "But next time, they'll think twice about underestimating primitive weapons." As the alien fleet retreated into space, humanity began the process of recovery. Museums would need new exhibits to replace the weapons that had saved Earth. But more importantly, they had a new chapter to add to their military history, one that proved the old ways were sometimes the best ways. The Kraxan had come expecting to find an inferior species. They left having learned a harsh lesson about the danger of underestimating humanity's greatest weapon: their ability to turn any disadvantage into a path to victory. The Kraxan fleet gathered at the edge of the solar system, a wounded predator preparing for one final desperate attack. High Commander Vextra stood before her remaining officers, their once pristine combat armor now bearing the scars of Earth's primitive weapons. "We cannot return to the Empire in defeat," she declared, "not against a pre-spaceflight species. We will strike with everything we have left. No more tactical retreats, no more defensive measures, pure overwhelming force." But Earth was ready. In the month since the Kraxan's withdrawal, humanity had been preparing. Commander Chen stood in a new command center, built deep within the Rocky Mountains, watching as global defense forces moved into position. "They're coming back," she addressed the assembled military leaders from around the world. "But this time, we're fighting on our terms from the start." The human defense plan was elegantly simple. While the Kraxan had been licking their wounds in space, engineers and historians had worked together to create hybrid weapons that combined the best of old and new. World War I-era flak cannons had been modified with modern targeting systems. P-51 Mustangs now carried experimental shield-disrupting devices alongside their original 50-caliber machine guns. First wave detected, announced the Global Defense Network. Kraxan fleet approaching at maximum velocity. No attempt at stealth or tactical positioning. Chen nodded. They're angry. Good. Angry enemies make mistakes. Launch Operation Legacy. Across Earth, defensive positions that the Kraxan sensors had dismissed as primitive came to life. In the mountains of Switzerland, rebuilt flak batteries emerged from camouflaged positions. Along the coastlines, restored coastal artillery, their shells enhanced with the same metamaterials that had proven so effective before, prepared to fire. The Kraxan struck like a thunderbolt, their remaining ships diving into Earth's atmosphere in a display of raw power. But this time, humanity was ready for them. All units, engage, Chen ordered. The sky erupted with fire as thousands of flak guns opened up simultaneously. The Kraxan's shields, already strained from constant modulation, buckled under the barrage of simple explosive shells. Their attempts to jam Earth's defense systems proved useless against weapons that relied on mechanical timing and human operators. In orbit, aboard the Dominion, Vextra watched in horror as her fleet began to disintegrate. Impossible. We analyzed every weapon they used against us. We prepared countermeasures. High Commander, her tactical officer interrupted. They're not using the same weapons. They've combined their old technology with new innovations. Our sensors can't compensate fast enough. The battle for Earth's skies became a testament to human ingenuity. Modified Spitfires and Mustangs, piloted by the best aviators on Earth, engaged Kraxan fighters with devastating effectiveness. The alien pilots, trained to rely on advanced targeting systems, found themselves outmaneuvered by humans flying largely mechanical aircraft. On the ground, the scene was equally chaotic for the invaders. Every Kraxan landing zone was met with a combination of restored tanks and modern anti-armor weapons. The alien shields, designed to counter either energy weapons or kinetic impacts, couldn't handle both simultaneously. Push them back, O'Connor ordered, leading a counterattack in the ruins of Tokyo. His forces, armed with both modified Garand rifles and modern pulse weapons, tore through the Kraxan's remaining ground forces. The decisive moment came when Squadron Leader Wang, leading a mixed formation of vintage and modern aircraft, identified a weakness in the Dominion's defense screen. All units, target Sector 7. Conventional weapons first, followed by energy strikes. The coordinated attack proved too much for the Kraxan flagship's overtaxed shields. As the massive vessel began to break apart, High Commander Vextra finally accepted the impossible. All forces, full retreat, she ordered, her voice heavy with defeat. Return to Imperial space immediately. The Kraxan fleet, or what remained of it, fled Earth's solar system in disorder. They left behind not just wreckage and ruins, but a lesson written in the pages of history. Never underestimate humanity's ability to learn from its past. In the aftermath, Commander Chen stood before the United Nations, delivering a speech that would be remembered for generations. Today, we've proven that true strength lies not in technological superiority, but in our ability to adapt and overcome. The Kraxan came expecting to find a primitive species. They found instead a civilization that had learned from every conflict, every struggle in its history. We defeated them not by matching their technology, but by remembering our roots and combining the wisdom of the past with the innovations of the present. As Earth began its recovery, museums were rebuilt. But now, alongside the vintage weapons that had helped save humanity, new exhibits appeared. They told the story of how humanity's greatest victory came not from abandoning its past, but from embracing it. The Kraxan never returned to Earth, but their defeat served as a warning to other spacefaring races. Earth was protected not just by its weapons or its technology, but by the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of warriors who had learned, adapted, and passed their knowledge on to the future. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon had proven to be its memory. The ability to remember that sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and that true strength lay not in the sophistication of one's weapons, but in the wisdom to know how best to use them.